to Leading the Way podcast, where you'll learn neuroscience-backed ways to lead more effectively and have more fun at work with what you already have.
Hey there, it's Chris, and welcome to Leading the Way. I'm so delighted you decided to join us today, and I have another amazing guest for you, Michelle Steiner. Michelle, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's going to be a great topic. Michelle, everyone on the show doesn't know all the amazing things about you, so I want to tell them a little bit about you, and then we'll jump right in. So, Michelle is someone who lives with an invisible disability. She's a prolific writer with her work featured in numerous publications, including The Mighty and Nonverbal Learning Project and Reluctant Spoonie and Kalapina Collective and Imagine the World as One magazine and Word Gathering and many, many others. She's also a great photographer. Her photography has also been showcased in Word Gathering, Independent, and Work Ready. In addition to her creative pursuits and her writing, Michelle works as a paraeducator supporting students with disabilities. She lives in Pennsylvania with her husband and their 2 cats. So again, welcome to the show, Michelle. So glad you're here. And tell me a little bit more, what does that mean, a hidden disability?
Sure, I'd be happy to. A hidden disability is a disability that people cannot see. I think a lot of times when people think about disabilities, we think of ones that we can see. We think of physical disabilities, such as somebody in a wheelchair. We might look at somebody that has a visual facial things such as Down syndrome. But when we think about hidden disabilities like learning disabilities or chronic pain, people aren't aware of them. A lot of times I'll tell somebody that I have a disability and they'll say to me, well, you don't look like you're disabled. And I have to go in and explain that not every disability is one that people can see.
Right, 100%, 100%. I have a son on the autism spectrum, and a common saying is the wheelchair is on the inside. And of course, people can't see it until, in my case, my kiddo is under duress, right? He's under a stressor he doesn't have the skills for, and there's undesirable behavior. And a lot of folks can get high-centered on that behavior outcome and not go to what's really behind it. I wonder if you see, with all the students you serve, how do you ever know, unless it's about it, there's an IEP or something else going on, but how would you even know that a kid would have an invisible disability?
A lot of times you don't, because you can't see it. You can't see if a student has autism, or you can't see if they have not even necessarily a disability, but you can't see if a student has diabetes or a student has allergies as well. And unless they tell you. But sometimes you can pick up on certain behaviors. And when you were saying about the behavior with your son, that is something that I will see sometimes in the classroom. I'll get a student that might be really acting out in the room, and we think, well, that's a bad kid. They're refusing to do their work. It'll often turn out that student can't read.
Right.
And nobody's offering, and nobody told me that, and nobody was even offering any support for that student in the classroom. And once I figure that out, I can be really subtle and go up and say, do you need me to read this to you? And usually they'll say yes. Sometimes they'll say no. And we can get some work done. But if I didn't know, or I wasn't good at picking up on some of the symptoms, then I might think, well, that's just a bad kid. Go to the principal's office.
Right. Right. And that's what a lot of us grew up with as a style, was command control, or, let's put the kid on a punishment reward scheme with stars and what have you. And what happens to those kids when they're not set up for a win, right? And it goes to that principal's office or punishment reward. Do things really change?
Not necessarily. There is a time that we do send them, but it really doesn't have a whole lot of a change with that. But sometimes when we can get in there and we can see, oh, you're not able to read, or you're really struggling with math, or you're struggling with the backpack. We're trying to find the paper in the backpack and everything. And those are all problems that are all issues that we can work with. And it's really, we don't need to send somebody to the principal if we can't read. We're able to read the test to a student that doesn't need that. And they don't even necessarily need to have an IEP to have me read a test to them in the classroom. That's something that can be offered for any student. And sometimes we might even have a student that might just need their backpack cleaned out to be able to find that science paper. And those are some really simple ways that we can prevent them from having to have it escalate to some behaviors that will end up send them into that punishment that really doesn't cure anything.
Right, right. I'm curious too, you know, it seems like post lockdown, post pandemic,
Mhm.
more of this is showing up that might have already been there before, but
Yeah.
there's more of it showing up. Is that your experience in the classroom? You're seeing more kiddos struggling?
We're seeing a lot more cases of anxiety. That's definitely something that is coming. We're seeing a lot of kids that have gaps in achievement because
Mm,
there was not anybody at home, or even if mom and dad were at home, they didn't know how quite to work with them. And sometimes we might have just passed a kid along just because how do you really do assess whether they were doing the work or not? So we will have kids that will have gaps in certain areas of academics.
mm,
That's a big thing. Socially, that's another thing too. A lot of our kids were, so their idea of school for that time, maybe when they were out or maybe they had an outbreak, was okay, I'm just going to go to class and then I'm going to play video games, and it's getting them back to sitting in the room and going to do the work, and then just seeing what a lot of our students that have disabilities, what they really need, and how to help them.
right, right. And in this world, it's, often known as accommodations or,
Yes.
setting the kiddo up for a win. Are there
Mhm.
types of accommodations that are useful and ones that are less useful?
I think a lot of the accommodations that I've found useful for myself and for what I do at work have been extended test time. That gets your brain that extra time to be able to figure out a test, and it's not that pressure to get it done. It also was helpful during some times where I had the test read aloud to me. I always thought that was a really helpful thing to have.
Hmm.
Tutoring when I needed it. Sometimes we even offer breaks for our students if they need a break and it's just so overwhelming in the classroom. And I might take a student out to go be able to walk around for a few minutes, and then we get back to class. That can be helpful. Sometimes it can even just be something as simple as setting someone in the front of the classroom. I always thought that was helpful for me. Uh, my ears were clogged whenever I was really young. So sometimes being able to hear somebody and was always really helpful. A note taker was another helpful accommodation I had when I was in college. My handwriting is not that great, so sometimes having somebody else write down the information was helpful. And also with the processing, I could focus really on what the lecture was and not trying to get every single word that may not be
Mm,
useful. One of the accommodations for my own self that I didn't find that was really helpful was whenever I was at university, uh, they thought that because I said I had visual perception issues, that was with my eyes, and that I needed things to be magnified. And I can remember that it was right on the psych evaluation. Oh yeah, large print material. And I'm thinking, okay, no, I really don't need that at that point, at this point. And I can remember the woman showing me this thing that could magnify things. And I'm trying to explain to this director that that's probably not going to be helpful. And she didn't believe me, but I never used it and it was never really an issue.
right,
But
right.
the other ones have been really helpful for me.
Gotcha. And when you or your students have those accommodation, is it a very different experience in the classroom? I mean, I'm guessing there's less, I'm using the wrong words here, but blowups or issues when they have those accommodations. And I would assume they're able to do better in school. Is that true?
I think in some, if our students can use them, because we still
Ah,
have students. I work this year. I'll be working with seventh graders, so we have they're at that place, but we offer them. And then in the very beginning of the year, sometimes is when a lot of these ideas don't always work. But
sure.
then towards the end is when it does. I can remember I had a student. I was helping her with her backpack every single day. She insisted she didn't need help, but I was able to go in and help her organize her things. And by the end of the year, she was asking me, how do you spell extra? Because
Mm,
she was able to organize her backpack at that point. And I think when you take a student from that beginning of the year with having no clue on how to organize a backpack or how to get through a lot of things, and then you take them to the next semester, and they understand, they know what they're doing by that time. It's just amazing. So I think some of those accommodations work, and they do reduce sometimes outbursts in the classroom. And if it's not working, then that's also a key too, that we need to do something different. Maybe that is doing another accommodation. Maybe it's working with the family to be able to provide something. Sometimes it can just be a switch in teachers. I mean, everybody has a
Mm.
different personality,
Sure.
and I always try to, say, well, I know what staff, all of our staff members are great, but there's certain ones that are better with certain kids. And it's just like with anybody else, we got to see what's working and really get in there to see, is this helpful? Is this effective? Especially when it's something we can't see. We can't see ADHD, we can't see autism or learning disability. So we have to be really on top of that with seeing what's working.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said it that way too, because they're folks that maybe even don't have a disability, but they have a set of stressors for whatever reason
Yeah.
in that moment that throws us over. And neurotypical people have that, I'm sure, as well.
Hmm.
So that's where this type of combination work probably is incredibly useful, because it's going to work in every human that's experiencing a stressor they don't know how to
Yeah,
deal with, right?
exactly. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that you can do in the room, and there's always going to be the kid that you're going to look at and think, why aren't they diagnosed?
Sure.
Yeah, and sometimes we can work with them. And I've had students that I have worked with that didn't have a diagnosis yet, but I was still reading the test aloud to them, helping them in the back of the room. And it was really no surprise to anybody that when they finally did get the diagnosis.
Sure, sure. I'm curious. I know my wife is a teacher for 18 years. I've
Hmm.
been working with amazing people like you, and I know how stressful the classroom can be.
Hmm.
Even if you're well equipped with all the right staff and funded perfectly, it still can be a
Right.
really stressful place. Trying to make this work for so many different learning modalities and everyone learning at the same pace, which is how we do it in the West,
Hmm.
right? Um, how do you, how do you recharge, or how do teachers recharge and stay engaged? I mean, that's got to be incredibly challenging.
I think one of the most important things is definitely having coworkers that are supportive of you too. Sometimes just having that break and going to lunch can be
Yeah.
really effective, and just talking with somebody. Oh, I'm struggling with today, and just talking with somebody. Sometimes that little walk that you do to just be able to go to the restroom, sometimes when you're losing that, I mean, and sometimes modeling that too, because you need a break.
Mm,
And as long as you're walking out when it's safe and there's another staff member in the room, and you're not leaving them, a bunch of kids alone. I've had to do that sometimes. And you regain your composure, and then you come back. And if there was something that happened, you make sure that you apologize to the student. And that's modeling behavior. That's modeling that, okay, everybody makes mistakes, everybody has things to happen, but it's how we handle that. And I also love to work out. So, I mean, either working out before I go to work or also going out afterwards. Sometimes that helps with stress. Even like I also love to read. So I'll bring a book along, and I'll have a journal or a notebook. And then I can do that during my lunch hour if I'm by myself or my coworkers aren't around. And that helps me to be able to kind of just have that time to recharge.
nice. That's so important. Are there things that I know school is a little bit different than corporate America for
Mhm.
sure, but there are leaders in the space. Are there things that leaders can do that create a space where you, as a paraeducator, and all educators, can feel safer
Mhm.
and more effective for the things they do?
I think one of the things is showing appreciation for your staff is really important. I love our administrative staff. They're always saying thank you for everything that you do, and they make every single staff member feel valued. And I think that's important. And I think it's also having the door open to, if you are struggling. I know sometimes I will go to the principal if it's real, like I've tried everything and nothing seems to be working, and
Yeah.
just having that open space to just be like, okay, this is what's going on. What do you suggest with that student? And being able to work together with that. I think that's really important.
Yeah, for sure. I love that, just meeting folks where they're at and honoring who they are as
Mhm.
people, and not just, pushing it through like a manufacturing process, which
Yes.
sadly that happens sometimes too. But it's glad to hear it
Yes,
doesn't
I
happen there.
agree.
Um, so parents sometimes well-intentioned can make things not as useful in the classroom, right? I'm sure you've
Mhm.
experienced that. They mean well. It's not a bad intentional thing. Are there any messages you generically want to let parents know, like, hey, when your special ed folks, your paraprofessionals, your
Mhm.
teachers, your administrators are communicating with you, what are something parents should do, maybe that they're not doing as well as they could?
I think it's to be open to what the staff is saying and to know that we're not against you. We're trying to work with you with your child. I think it's that openness to be able to understand that and to work with us. I
Hmm.
know whenever I was in school, I had the privilege of running into one of my first learning support teachers, and I thanked her for that. And she said, "Well, your mom and I work together. If I had a concern, I would call her. If she had a concern, she would call me, and we work together with you to figure out how we can best serve you." So I think it's that going into that and working together that I would love to see a lot more of, and just really getting an idea of what is happening in the room too. Because I think sometimes a parent might come in and say, "Well, that's not my child," and I'm not saying we always get it perfect, but I think when you have that openness, that we can really help and give a lot of resources to be able to work together.
Yeah, it's so important not to have and it can be natural, I think, for parents to
Hmm.
be protective of their kids, well
Right, of
intentioned,
course.
but miss that
Yes.
there's a whole slew of professionals here that really want to help
Yeah.
move the dial. They don't want your kid to be in trouble. Um,
No.
right. That's not the
Right.
intent.
That's definitely not. We just want to figure out how to make the situation better for them. And especially even at home too. If we can help them with homework, we can help with behavior, they're going to have a better time at their house as well.
100%. 100%.
Hmm.
And, I see overtones in the workplace with
Hmm.
exactly what happens in school. And sadly, there's not generally paraprofessionals and stuff in the workplace. So if someone has an issue and acts out, right, that's a bad mark in them for a long time, right? And it's
Right.
these same sorts of practices applied to adults, of course, have got to be
Hmm.
effective in the workplace. Instead of going to, Chris got angry in a meeting and Chris is a bad dude, like
Hmm.
afterwards, what was going on, and
Yes.
figuring out those supports, because these patterns don't go away just as we get older, right? They continue. Uh,
Exactly. I like to say a lot of times, especially with advocacy, it's so important that we show them how to advocate or and to teach them a lot of these skills, because our students will graduate, they'll leave us, but that disability most likely isn't going to leave them. So they
right.
need to know how to handle this out in the real world.
Yeah, for sure. And then there's a whole awareness training for leaders to be aware that that's
Hmm.
probably what's going on. It's not
Yep,
someone out to get you, or
exactly.
yes, there's a small percentage of bad actors on our planet, but most are not, right?
Right. Mostly there's a reason behind what we do. And uh, especially I know with going into workplaces, a lot of times people will see me. Uh, I have to always give the disclaimer, I cannot help you with math. The students will soon find out this year that I'm not able to help them with math. But a lot of times people will see a disability at the office, or
Mm,
and if they don't know, they think that this is somebody that's messing up on purpose or is lazy. And it's just so important. There's all to disclose that. I mean, I know there's always that question whether you tell or you don't.
sure.
But if I don't let people know and I fall further behind with the work, it doesn't help me at all.
Right. 100%. Yeah. And it's every time I've seen it in the corporate world,
Hmm.
when I'm smart enough to do it or someone else is smart enough to really look to set someone up for a win, there's always a positive result. I mean, very, very
Yep,
rarely has it
exactly.
been, okay, this person really isn't a fit, and that's a different conversation, but it's something's blocking them
Hmm.
that they're not even aware of often.
Yeah,
And, given the chance and set up for a win, they want to do well. It's not a desire to be a C or D performer.
right. No,
And
everybody, yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the other pattern I'm curious about too is kids who struggle, going back to kids,
Hmm.
um, they see the kids that are doing well, and it's got to be challenging for them. It's got to, like, we can't get inside and see, but it's got to feel hurtful or scary or feel bad about themselves that they just don't naturally have those skills. They weren't born with them. They weren't conditioned with them. Um, but once they get these supports, do you see their self-esteem rise and their belief in themselves rise as well?
I definitely do. You can see the self-esteem. You can see the kid that comes in and says, "Oh, I'm not very smart." Know that they are after we've been able to work with them. I had a really good example of that last year. We took some students aside that had some reading difficulties, and we placed all the students had interventions. Everybody did. It was just all tailored on what their levels are. Even the ones that wouldn't qualify as being disabled
Mm,
had that as well. And I worked with the ones that did have some indicators of disability. And I worked with a girl that didn't really struggle with reading. In fact, we knew it was probably dyslexia because she was not hearing how sounds were, but we were showing her strategies. And one of the blessings was I get to be in other classrooms with them. And she didn't know how to spell a word. She was working in a group and she didn't know how to spell the word chicken. And she was starting to sound it out. So we told her to do. And you could just see in her head, she's sounding out the
mm,
word and she's knowing what to do. I don't know if she spelled it correctly, but she really understood. You could just see her understanding of what she needed to do, and then that made her feel more confident. And we later, when they tested her, she made a lot of really positive gains from having that intervention and that support. I see a lot of times students who are so happy when if I help them study for a spelling test, and they're really hesitant at the beginning of the week, like, "Oh, I don't think I'm going to pass this. Why do I got to do this?" And they're grumbling. And when we get to Friday and they take their test, they come to me later on the day. "Hey, I got an A on my test, or I got a
oh,
B," and that makes me feel a lot better. And I say, "We'll see. We just take the words apart, we study, and you can do a good job on that."
yeah, it's so important for them to have the evidence that they can be successful. That's just
Yeah.
really powerful. Uh, why do you do this work? Because I know what paraprofessionals are paid. It's generally not a lot, so it's not for fame and fortune. What motivates you to do this?
What motivates me is helping another student to succeed. I know whenever I was in school, I there wasn't as many paraprofessionals, and I also had a disability where I didn't have a lot of representation. I didn't know anybody else that had a math disability. Everybody else that was in my learning support classes struggled with behavior,
Mm,
reading, or writing, and I was pretty much the only one that really struggled with math, or really struggled with it. Some of my other peers, they did better with that. And I couldn't find where I really related.
mm,
I also would read books, and most of the books were people that were male and were in college, and they had reading disabilities. So I didn't feel like I fit in with anybody.
mm,
And I get that chance now to tell these students that I get to be that voice that gets the chance to tell them, you're not stupid. Your
mm.
brain is wired differently, and you can do it. And I wish sometimes that would be the voice that I got to hear. Now everybody's different, but I hear a lot of what I do hear in the room is things that I heard whenever I was younger. And I just want to be that reassuring voice that encourages them. I also had a lot of people that discouraged me. I had a learning support teacher who told me I couldn't go to college. And I also had a psychiatrist who told me I want to go beyond community college.
Mm.
But I get to start them out when they're really young to think about what they want to do in their life and encourage them. And I just want to have another student that will come to me someday and say, "Thank you. I was successful because you pointed me in the right direction."
Oh, that's beautiful. I love it. Michelle, I know a big part of what you do in being podcasts like this and your reach out is to connect
Mhm.
with other people with disabilities and be a resource for them. For our listeners, what's a great way for them to connect with you?
You can find me at my website, www.mrsmichellesmission.com.
Awesome. Okay. And we'll put that in the show notes. So if you're on a
Yes.
jog or driving, please don't hurt yourself. You can find that later. Michelle, thank you so much for being on the show today. Before we close out, I love to ask all my guests, what's something you're thankful or grateful for today?
I am very thankful and grateful for my husband, Ron.
Nice. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I thank you for the work you do and serving. I cannot think of anything more important than serving our kids and next generation because, well, they're the next generation, right? It's the next class of
Yes.
humans coming through, and we definitely want them to have resources maybe we didn't and have even a better
Right.
life. So thank you so much for that work. And awesome listeners, if you know someone that this would benefit, please share it with them. That's a very loving thing to do. And we all kind of know people that parents that are struggling through things, or maybe we have a friend that's got an invisible disability that we could serve and connect. So be sure to save this podcast, share it with them, and keep leading the way. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to Leading the Way podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe so you won't miss other great episodes like this one. And if you're ready for more in your workplace, be sure to go to aintent.com. You'll find lots of free tools, assessments, and ways to engage directly with us to get your own epic results. We'll see you there.